My name is Michael Muthukrishna. I'm professor of economic psychology and affiliate in developmental economics and data science. Welcome to my exp. Evolution can be very inefficient. It is about diversity or variation, transmission, and selection. And many approaches are failed approaches. Evolution can be made more efficient. Cultural evolution can be made more efficient in a variety of ways. So sharing of ideas, building up frameworks. The scientific method is a very, very efficient way of doing what humans have always done. So when we talk about small-scale societies possessing a kind of scientific method, it's kind of true in the sense that there are, for example, pregnancy taboos found around the world that are highly attuned to teratogens, things that can harm a baby. And that has been a wasteful process by which women have eaten things that had toxins in them and eaten things that didn't have toxins in them that are sometimes perfectly fine if you're not pregnant, but are very harmful to a baby if you are pregnant. And over time, they have learned the taboos, things to avoid, and the things you should be eating when you're pregnant. It's a very, very wasteful process. The scientific method is a much more efficient version of that, where we have clear building up of theories, we have hypothesis testing, we have clear guidelines for what constitutes the best evidence, and a way to accumulate knowledge over time. For the longest time, medicine was really just an accumulation of things that we discovered over the years, but it really accelerates once it became an evidence-based field and will accelerate even further the more it integrates a deeper theoretical understanding of how the body works and how it evolved, for example. The biggest problems that we face are a little bit like that. We are trying all kinds of things that people are just coming up with, often isolated. There is not enough plagiarism of policies, not enough learning of policies around the world so that we don't make the same mistakes in different places and so that we can discover something that works in Taiwan and bring it over to the United Kingdom. We can discover something that works in Estonia and bring it over to New Zealand. How to do that? How to share knowledge in a way that is efficient? How to create a cultural evolutionary process that's more efficient is absolutely essential to tackling the problems that we face around the world. As I often say, we didn't actually design anything. What we see are the end products of people trying all kinds of different designs and the successful ones continuing on. So we talk about the Magna Carta, we don't talk about all the failed versions of the Magna Carta that preceded it. We talk about the US Constitution, we don't talk about, the Brazilian version or other constitutions. Why? Because they worked. One of the things that a scientific approach and a proper theory of everyone provides is the ability to pinpoint mistakes. So you see this across the sciences. Before the periodic table, before Mendeleev and Lavoisier and so on, we had created gunpowder. We did some chemistry that really worked, made things go bang. But we were also trying to turn lead into gold. Newton, brilliant guy, trying to turn lead into gold. Why? Not because he was stupid, but because he didn't understand that the world was made up of discrete elements that fit together in a periodic table and that recombined and separated and so on in very, very specific ways. Now, once we had the periodic table, we could move away from the world of alchemy into the world of chemistry. What I would argue is today a lot of the human and social sciences are really in the world of alchemy, even though we have the beginnings of the periodic table. We have a kind of theory of human behavior, theory of everyone, theory of cultural evolution and so on that enables us to do things. And it points to things that look like alchemy, things that are probably things that are almost certainly going to go wrong. Climate change is a very serious issue. And an instinctual solution to it is to try to cut back. So if you decide I'm not going to have children, you're going to be replaced by those who have children, right? If you aim for strategies like degrowth, you are creating the zero-sum conditions that lead to a fracturing and breaking down of society. The alternative to this that the theories might suggest are that clean growth that is less harmful to the planet, gives us options. So it is often the countries that are wealthiest that don't need to cut down the rainforest to produce more food for its people, and who can invest in conservation because they're wealthier. They have options. They have energy abundance. So energy abundance, for example, is critical to this whole process. One of the great missteps of Germany and one of the great successes, I think, of France was the investment in nuclear technology. We can see the after effects of Germany shutting down its nuclear technology. With sky-high energy prices, a reliance on Russian oil and gas, it made itself vulnerable. Energy abundance gives you options. The stillborn nuclear age is one of the reasons that we are in the climate crisis that we're in today, rather than being able to transition to a more electrified grid, far more efficient, and generate electricity through nuclear and eventually through solar, where it's available to us. In terms of climate change, I would say at the moment, the attention really needs to be on repairing the damage that we've done and adapting to the damage that is about to arrive. In order to tackle something as big as climate change or an energy transition, we need a systems-level perspective. It's not enough to think about a particular technology by itself. It's not enough to even just think about power generation. We need to think about transmission, for example. We need to think about how the whole system wires up together. And in part, that means evaluating technologies and potential energy technologies in terms of their energy return on investment, their availability, and how they fit into the system. So take something like solar. It's going to be fantastic the closer you are to the equator. In places like Britain, solar is unlikely to be the solution. We don't have the land and we don't have the sunlight. Nuclear is going to be a far better option for the UK and Europe. So thinking about this kind of at a systems level, thinking about what is actually available to us will, I think, enable us to make the necessary transition and give us the options that we need to help clean up the planet and invest in the kinds of things that don't create a bigger mess for our children. Misinformation isn't about information, right? We have such a narrow sliver of the world that we don't have the skills to evaluate information outside of our own narrow expertise. Even as scientists, we understand, we trust the scientific process, we trust particular institutions or particular scientists, and we know our sliver of the scientific world. But anything outside of that, we have to do it on the basis of trust. So misinformation and disinformation isn't about information, it's about trust. Most of the things that we think we understand about the world are on the basis of trust, right? So we believe that it is germs that make us sick and not spirits. And I'm not saying it's not germs that make us sick. I have every reason to believe that it is, but I also have every reason to believe that most people accept that on the basis of trust in the scientific community. We see the people around us washing their hands and behaving in ways that there are these invisible animals that we have not personally seen and don't know all that much about that seem to make us sick, and not the spirits. Now, if you grew up in the Amazon, the Guarani tribe, let's say, you would believe that it was spirits that were making you sick, and that you would anger the spirits, and you would provide evidence of the noises you heard in the forest, of the spirit waking up, or the wind blowing, and so on. Just as much as in the modern society, people will talk about, I saw under a microscope, I watched this documentary, and so on. So if we want to reduce the influence of misinformation, it's not about information, it's about restoring trust in the sources of information. For, I think, very noble reasons, many scientists would say, listen, all of us are biased and all of us are political, and therefore science is, by its very nature, a political enterprise. And I think that has been incredibly corrosive and harmful to trust in science and trust that the public have in the scientific enterprise. Because if you can't trust scientists to speak openly and say things that are politically harmful, that may harm particular groups, and just speak freely about what they really think about how the world works, then you can't trust science. If you can't trust scientists, you can't trust science. And so I think in order to restore that, we have to try our best to be less biased and try our best to be less political and just relay what it is that we're discovering. Now, science doesn't work because any one of us can do that. We cannot do that. Science is a collective enterprise where we are incentivized, rewarded for showing one another that other people are wrong. And so creating the space for dangerous ideas, creating the space for for people to argue with one another without concerns around the political implications of that is absolutely essential to restoring trust in the scientific process and restoring trust in scientists.